first informally, Professor Fatima Keshavarz, who I heard at the Sultan Qaboos Cultural Center when we did a program, in fact, on the 5 senses, when Middle East Studies Association was there, and 5 or 6 of the outreach offices collaborated on that one. And she read poetry, her own, and Rumi poetry in Persian, and it needed no translation. It was just so beautiful you could taste the language and feel it. And so I'm very happy to have her back at one of our programs here. She was born and raised in the city of Shiraz, which is the city of poets, right? She completed her studies in Shiraz University and the University of London. She taught at Washington University in St. Louis for over 20 years, where she chaired the Department of Asian and Near Eastern Languages and Literatures from 2004 to 2011. In 2012, she joined the University of Maryland as Roshan Institute Chair in Persian Studies and Director of the Roshan Institute for Persian Studies. She is the author of award-winning books, including Reading Mystical Lyric, The Case of Jalaluddin Rumi, Recite in the Name of the Red Rose, and a book of literary analysis and social commentary, which you have, entitled Jasmine and Stars, Reading More Than Lolita in Tehran. She has also published other books and numerous journal articles. Keshavarz is a published poet in Persian and English and an activist for peace and justice. She was invited to speak at the UN General Assembly on the significance of cultural education. Her National Public Radio show, The Ecstatic Faith of Rumi, brought her the Peabody Award in 2008. In the same year, she received the Herschel Walker Peace and Justice Award. So welcome.
Thank you. It is a great pleasure to be here talking to you about poetry and with poetry. I would like everybody else, thank the organizers. Only those who have organized know what a work this is to, even if it's a one-day event, how time-consuming and intricate it is in order to get it right. So thank you, Susan and team, very much. Poetry is about community. It's about sharing your voice with those who are interested in hearing your voice. And so it is an equally great pleasure to the one who presents, as hopefully it will be to those who would listen to it. So let me just tell you give you a general idea of kind of a map of what I am about to do, and then hopefully there will be a little bit of time for exchange, either after the program or sometime in the time that we have left together. The book you have in hand, Reading More Than Lolita in Tehran, or Jasmine and Stars, Reading More Than Lolita in Tehran. I wrote this book in 2008, it came out, and it was, actually I wrote it earlier, it took a long time for the publisher to get it out, but the purpose of it was to counter what I considered to be an extreme sense of not knowing about Iran, which was, and even not wanting to know enough, because this part of the world had been portrayed as the enemy, the dark one, the wrong one, all the
axis of evil.
Yes, part of the axis of evil. And then the book Reading Lolita in Tehran had kind of really given that national kind of seal of approval by showing that that country consisted of villains and victims. And there was nothing in between. Iran I knew, and I used to come back to, and you know, was tremendously complex, very exciting, and very, very different. And a lot of people feared that if they say so, they would come across as supporting some kind of a totalitarian regime, and therefore they have to just either stay silent or just basically be a very, I don't want to say timid, but lower, unintrusive voice. So I wanted to do the opposite. I wanted to disrupt that in the loudest possible way I could. And one of the loud ways was to put Reading Lolita in Tehran in my title, so that when people go searching for that, they could actually see that there was one that was skeptical of it. And that actually has worked. I've heard so many emails from people who teach courses who say, thank you, we taught that book and now we have something to counter with. But the reason why that's relevant to what I'm telling you about is that as you read the book, I hope you will find out that poetry has a tremendous place in that book. Not just because poetry is such an important, integral part of Iranian people's lives, but it actually is true that it has more or less the same place in the American society, in its own version, in its own way of communicating with each other. And I wanted to have a poetic voice while I craft kind of the voice of those poets from across the ocean over there to mine and bring it to Americans. And that's in a way what I'm going to do today in a miniature, small version. And I heard a lot of fascinating comments today. I think one of you talking about images said, well, I want the students to see what's the relevance to my life. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm hoping to do. What's the relevance of poetry to my life? Is it this kind of exotic, oriental art object, carefully crafted, which in some ways it is? Or is it something that talks about life, that really helps me see aspects of Iranian life, which I have not seen? And in my opinion, and I think a lot of people have done that in different ways, and I think it came out both in Ahmed and Amy's lectures, the best way to do this is to give a taste. You know, you can talk about something forever, describe it, that's good, it's one way of dealing with it. But the best way to make people want more and want to go to it more is to give them a taste of it. So that's what I am hoping I'll be able to do. And I'm hoping that in your classrooms you can take this kind of nugget, the small gift that I'm bringing here and share it with your students so that they will be then excited and interested to do that for themselves. So, what is today's Persian poetry? And of course, over time, poetry, like all the other artifacts, goes through historic changes, social changes, things that are impacted by the social reality around people. So we have what we call Persian poetry that all the Iranians could understand, pretty much, is very diverse, goes through various styles, and it covers about 1,000 years. So when people say New Persian, or sometimes modern Persian, is understood by Iranians today when it was written a long time ago. I'll give you an example. On the cover of every elementary school book, or actually even high school, I think, it says Tabana بود هر که دانا بود به دانش دل پیر برنا بود, which means the one who knows is strong, and knowledge brings youth to your heart. Well, this was written 1,000 years ago by Ferdowsi, the poet who wrote the Book of Kings. That is kind of the national epic of the Turkish. There are other epics, but this is really the mother epic. So I'm talking about that length of time, and there are all kinds of linguistic conversations about why this has happened and so forth. Probably a combination of many factors. The fact that culture, even though it had a very powerful manuscript written tradition, as you saw in Andy's presentation, it also had a very powerful oral tradition. Just kind of they grow up side by side. People memorize this, then perform it in tea houses or in their own homes or wherever, or on the battlefield when they are, so this is supposed to give them courage to face the enemy. So, in a way, there's the fact that this language can spread so effectively across the culture gives it a stabilizing quality. you know it by heart. I mean, my most distinct memory of my parents is their poetry recitation. Now, when my mother was upset with me, she would say, "Tabiat no ahra chun girdakan bar gom bedas." That the Farsi speakers are smiling because it means, probably their mother said that to them. It means trying to discipline a rascal. It's like trying to balance a walnut on top of a dome. Well, it never stays there, it rolls down, right? So we can't, like, you're such a rascal, I can't even shake. But, you know, no matter how angry she tried to look, in this walnut rolling down, there was a laughter. There was a way we connected with each other. And so that's what I mean by the oral quality of the tradition, stabilizing it. And I mean, this was written by Sadi of Shiraz in the 13th century. Imagine, like, you know, my mother can read, and I can understand it as a kid. I mean, I might not be quite familiar with the word na'ah, which I would get from the shaking of the fingers, but generally it would make perfect sense, and as you went along, you pieced them together. I remember we visited the tomb of Sadi of Shiraz, the same poet, on Nowruz. And when you get to the door, this is a huge metal, unfortunately, blue door that was produced about a century and a half ago. And on the door it says, "Zakhak Sa'di Shiraz bouye ishq ayad, hazar sal pas az marg o garash budi," which means the earth in which the Sa'di of Shiraz is buried emanates the scent of love. Even if you come to it 1,000 years after he has died, has been buried, has been dead. And, you know, I remember how I understood the general scent of love, and then I tried to piece the words together as we went, time after time there. So it's kind of an absorption of this literary tradition. Of course, the scent of love was very distinct because there was a very famous Bastani Sadi creamery there. We had ice cream there right after we visited Sadi of Shiraz. Anyway, so I'm talking about this tradition, and that in its early stages, and as Ahmed said, Persia never really disappeared from the scene when Islam entered Iran, and I'm really against calling it takeover because it took a long time, as he said, almost 3.5, 4 centuries for it to spread, to become a majority. And actually, Muslims were a minority in the early stages. What they built was destroyed by non-Muslims for a long time. So it wasn't a kind of, it was a fighting back and forth gradual movement. And it went, but somewhere around, I think before Ferdowsi, it would be right to say the 3rd and early 4th century of Islam that Persian language became both the language of the court and officially a language that people would write their poetry and publish their work in. And the form of poetry that came back at that point was the form of rubai or poetry. Some of you may be familiar with the quatrains of Omar Khayyam, translated by Fitzgerald, in 4 lines. It was a fascinating form for poetry. First of all, it was very musical. Its rhythm was maf'ul, mafa'ilun, mafa'ilun, fa. Or sometimes later on they said la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There are ways that people try to memorize that. Okay. It was very rhythmic. It was short. You could remember it very easily. And then it always, because you had to say something in those 4 lines, the very last punchline was very beautiful and memorable. And there were some people who did it very effectively, including, for example, this mystic called Abu Sa'id, who was from the Khorasan area. So here's one way. فردا که قیامت آشکارا گردد و از بیم حساب روی ها گردد زرد من حسن تو را به کف نهم پیش روم گویم که حساب من از این باید کرد. Tomorrow when the day of resurrection comes and fear of punishment is written on faces, I will put your beauty on the palm of my hands and I move forward and say, this explains everything that I've done. So, it's also very, very actually technical because Sufis, and Abu Sa'id was a Sufi, introduced the element of beauty, the element of love and beauty, which wasn't never, totally disappearing or missing from other traditions, but they emphasized it. They said, we are here because we are capable of falling in love. And what helps us fall in love is this beauty. So this explains my humanity. I can make errors. I'm never perfect. I'm not an angel. But I can see the beauty and fall in love. Or Rumi, for example. Another Rubai, he actually doesn't write a lot of poetry, but this is one of my favorites. عشق از ازل است تا ابد خواهد بود جوینده عشق بی عدد خواهد بود فردا که قیامت آشکارا گردد آن هر که نه عاشق است رد خواهد. So love is from pre-eternity. It is going to last forever. The seekers of love beyond number or beyond number. Tomorrow, when the day of resurrection comes, see, they're always challenging that powerful discourse of you will be punished, right? فردا که قیامت آشکارا گردد. Tomorrow, when the day of resurrection comes, the one who is not in love is the one who cannot enter. So, and this would be read, listened to, memorized, taught, used in calligraphy. One of the other memories I have of my childhood is my father writing these, and you could hear the reed pen going into the ink and slipping on the paper and making this beautiful sound as he tried to get it right. So this voice seeps in there. And I want to do one more rubai because I think it says a lot about the philosophy that the mystics brought to us. And I want to say a few things, maybe a couple of things about the mystics in a very, very truncated, incomplete, imperfect way. Now, the mystics were the ones who said, at least the Sufis we're talking about, and they have a wide range. I mean, you can see highly conforming religious ones and totally free ones. So, but the majority are in the middle. And what they introduce into the concept of religion is that they say, I don't need any intermediary. I can be directly connected with the divine because I do have this kernel of the divine inside. I'm going to quote some Rumi for you later where he actually gives tremendously, really shocking expression to it. But we come from that center, we disperse into the world, we go back to that center. That's the story of our lives as far as we're concerned. There are kind of things we need to do, say. We need to be true to ourselves and to others, compassion, bewilderment, capable of not knowing and then going after knowing. Bewilderment is very important for them. To look at a bee and be bewildered. To look at a flower and be bewildered. And so allow yourself not to know, but then seek knowing through that not know. And here's the report. در بحر صفا گداختم همچون نمک نه کفر و نه ایمان نه یقین ماند و نه شک اندر دل من ستاره‌ای پیدا شد گم گشت در آن ستاره هر 7 فلک. I melted in the sea of purity, back to Sappho, in the sea of purity like salt. Nothing remained. Infidelity, faith, doubt, certainty, all melted away. And that element ستاره‌ای پیدا شد. The star appeared in the center of my being. گم گشت در آن ستاره هر 7 فلک. The 7 heavens drowned in that one star. And if you look at it, it's actually completely Quranic. That is like, or Hadith oriented. That God says, I don't fit in the heaven and the earth, but I fit in the heart of my believing believer, created being, believer. Created being, actually. Right, moment, I believe, that's right. Here's the story of Rubai, and so what is it that poetry does? I mean, just a lot. But I think there's an attempt to bring these words to life and to remind the reader that this is not to be left in a book. It is to be absorbed into their lives, and it is to live with them. Now Rumi gives a fascinating example of that. He says, خود از کف دست من مرغان عجب رویم می از لب من جوشد در مستی آنها رفت. Wondrous birds grow from the palm of my hands. مرغان عجب. So, what are the مرغان عجب, the wondrous birds? First of all, who creates birds from the palm of their hands? Magicians. Magicians. I create these lovely birds. What are these birds? These words. Why are they birds? Because they're alive. They fly away. They're not his anymore. They belong to the ones who adopt them. They sing. They're musical. They're colorful. You can just go on with these amazing metaphors and see what he wanted to do. But again, his point was this, that I write this poem, my job's ended, yours has begun. You take this bird and make it yours, and make it sing the way you can make it sing. And you know, this is the most advanced theoretical thinking about poetry. Today we talk about reader reception. The fact that meaning is not just created in poetry, it's created also with the reader's knowing of what's going on. But anyway, so he talked about the concept rather than theorizing, which wasn't something a poet of his age would have done, although he has talked about poetry a lot. Okay. So these poems did different things with their rhythm. Ferdowsi would write this poetry that's blanking on Hamoste.
Epic.
Epic, thank you. And he wrote this epic poetry. چو فردا برآید بلند آفتاب من و گرز و میدان و افراسیاب. So he's going to, the hero's going to fight. When tomorrow the sun comes up, I'm going to be there facing my enemy. But then when he talks about the beloved coming, Bahar Ahmad, Bahar Ahmad, Bahar Mosh, Bahar Ahmad, Negar Ahmad, Negar Ahmad, Negar Ahmad. The spring is here, the spring is here. My beloved is here. My kind and patient beloved is here. So the rhythm clearly addresses that, and sometimes it is the rhythm of not knowing. Mystics have a lot of bewilderment there. درد خود را دوا نمیدانم، گم شدم سر ز پا نمیدانم، از لیانی ستیچنان مستم که ثواب از خطا نمیدم. This is Atta. This is, I'm totally lost. Guys, I don't know. Don't ask me anything. I don't know the answer to anything. I don't even know the difference between my head and foot. And he's a pharmacist, he's a physician, pharmacist. So he says, believe me, I sometimes don't know the difference between pain and the cure for the pain. So there's a lot of attempt, and I think that's such a great contribution to our education. We want to unravel. We want to know the answer. Facticity, facts are knowledge. And they're a part of knowledge, no question about that. But what these guys are saying is that not knowing sometimes has a bigger quality if it becomes the fuel for your engine to go seek and find out and follow. So I think that that really values what they did. Actually, let me just give you this one as well. I thought that we're doing too much poetry, but maybe not. So there's a rhythm of change that I really love the way Rumi deals with it, and it goes like this. مرده بودم زنده شدم گریه بودم خنده شدم دولت عشق آمد و من دولت پاینده شدم گفت که دیوانه نی لایق این خانه نی رفتم و دیوانه شدم سلسله بندنده شدم. Says, I was dead, I came to life. I was a cry, I turned into laughter. The fortune of love came and I turned into everlasting fortune myself. He or she, we don't know, because Persian is not, pronouns are not gender specific, said that you're not crazy enough. You don't deserve to be with me in this house. I turned crazy. I put myself in chain. But when you read the poem, you just see these changes in the rhythm as well. And very often, quite a bit of that gets lost when you do translation, which is very hard to do. Because not only there's rhythm and rhyme, there is also internal rhyme inside the phrases that rhyme. Now, I had never imagined life without poetry until I left Iran. And I was, 25, 26? I had always assumed that, of course it's a part of life, You sit around each other at night and somebody reads something, or somebody remembers something from memory. You get into the taxi and the driver is doing, reciting something. You go to buy bread and the person who's putting the bread in the oven is reciting Umar Khayyam. Now, I'm not saying that all those people were, scholars of poetry and they could give you, but there are different levels. Different layers of this poetry was very much in their lives and made sense to them. And, not only, so for one thing, it wasn't just only a specialized art. It was at the university level, but elsewhere, it belonged to everyone. It was a part of life, but I think, more importantly, it was like a kind of internet. It connected you with others who were familiar with that. Rumi has a verse with which he opens his Masnavi, which is بشنوین نی چون حکایت میکند از جدایی ها شکایت میکند, which is listen to the reed as it complains about separations, and that is telling a story and it complains about separation. Now, I remember instances like somebody would be reciting this and my grandmother would be thinking about her daughter who lived in another city and she was separated from her. And my father was a practicing Sufi, would be considering that an in-depth commentary on separation from the divine and so on. And so, as I wrote about Sadi, for example, more recently, I compare this, I call this poetry the Silk Road of imagination. It is really the Silk Road of the imagination, in the sense that across the route of the Silk Road, not only there is goods were transferred, but all these ideas. And imagine you go somewhere, to some land or some place, and somebody will say, oh, what is the latest you remember from the poetry of Saadi? What is recently being known from the poetry of Rumi, and so on. And there were people who go to a new place and get a job immediately, because knowing this literature showed where their education stood, and how much did they know and how much they were trained. So I think that it's great that in our tradition here, now slam poetry is flourishing. Young people are interested in that. I go when I can, and be happy to go to slam poetry, which I think is amazing. And also other kinds of poetry. Young people show, I mean, we do a poetry competition in the university. They come forward and do that. So I would highly recommend that. And also getting to know our poets here. You know, when I started writing poetry in English, one of the funnest surprises and shocks of my life were the amazing number of great American poets I met. And many through books and sometimes in person. You know, Bill Stafford, Robert Bly, Mary Oliver, you know, depending on who you know and where you are. Billy Collins, one of my favorites. You know, these people are there, and we can, through their words, connect with the students. I would really highly recommend that, because, and also in translation poetry of other parts of the world. The poetry from the other parts of the world helps them see how they were the only ones occupying the earth. There are all these other voices. You know, the academic way to say it is that their subjectivity becomes an intersubjectivity. Forget about all of that. You know, they learn about other people and they feel humbled. I'm not the only one that occupies the earth. I'm not the only one who who can do something with his or her life. And therefore, it's important to get to know others and kind of appreciate other people on the face of the earth. And if something is happening which involves aggression about other cultures, should we question? Should we just not accept to go along as seeing that culture totally dark? You know, I did a course on mystical lyric, about which later on I do say a few things, and it wasn't political at all. It was just poetry. But by the time it ended, the students would write to me, I have a different appreciation of Iran, I have a different appreciation of the world. You know, so it is that way of, I think, bridge building. And it's also a way to break people's individual prisons. You know, those of us who teach, whether at any level, we know about bullying, we know about anxiety, we know about suicide instances. In this past academic year, the very first week we came on campus, the University of Maryland, a student trip. It was just terrible. Terrible that it just happened the very first week of the semester. And all of these are rooted in a sense of loneliness that is beyond being in your room alone. It's loneliness here. It's a sense of being trapped. And so one of the things that these poets do is opening that door. Literally opening the cage of your chest and saying that bird inside could fly and it could allow other birds to come in. Now, I have a memory of my mother. We did this game in Iran called Mushaire. You would recite a line and the next person would recite a line with the first letter of the last word in the poem, and it would go on and on. I was over memory. And yeah, everybody in my family just loved that. Even up to 5 or 6 years ago, when my mother was almost gone in terms of her memory and all that. When we did Mushaira with her, she remembered the words. And remembered the words and sensed them, not just. So one memory I have from my childhood is that my mother was a fairly reserved person. She had her own way of doing things and would not really open up unless she definitely wanted to. In the Mushaira game, she would open up and recite the most open, whether it was erotic, whether it was anti-traditional, whether it was anti-religious. She would completely freely recite them. So to me, later on I thought about that. It was about borrowing another voice and make it your own. And I think that's very important. One of her favorite poems, and I want in her honor to recite a part of that. It's a famous Azal of Sa'di actually, which goes in Persian, یک روز به شیدایی در زلف تازیزم و از آن دو لب شیرین سچون برانگیزم گفتی به غمم بنشین یا از سر جان برخی فرمان برم از جانا بنشین Someday I'll find my way to those lovely curls of your sweet lips alone. I will tell 100 savory tales. Do you wish to be unkind? Here, I have only one life. Consider it yours. Or if you wish to stay, I'll spread it like a carpet beneath your feet. Repentance and restraint are not the way to reckon with your love. From this moment on, I promise to never repent. My sad, silvery heart went missing in your neighborhood. In vain, I roamed the earth, searching every corner. You say, sit in sorrow till the end of your days, or rise and give yourself to love. Whatever you say, my love, I'll sit and rise, and sit and rise. So, I still have really the memory of my mother reciting that very happily, very openly, and you know, that was for me. And Sadi, the same Sadi, I mean, he had this most poignant criticism of hypocritical religious practice. You know, there's nothing he hasn't said, and nobody could counter him because he was just such a well-known, well-established voice in the tradition. And let me tell you this, there's a morning prayer that Muslims do early before dawn. It's 2 rak'ah short prayer, but it's an amazing experience. If you get up at that time, and you know, the sun, it's just getting a little bit bright, but the sun's not out yet. And so, let me just read from that part. So Sadi is actually talking about his own childhood, but we don't know if he's talking about his childhood or not. But he says, well, when I was young and I had learned how to pray, and I was proud of it and so on, and one morning when I had gotten up to do my prayer, noticing some members of the household sleeping not very far from them, and convinced that, now I'm talking about Sadi, convinced that his good performance has earned him a measure of authority to judge others, he turned to Father and says, none of these folks rise to offer a humble morning prayer to the Lord. So deep are they in their heedless slumber that they might as well be dead. Father does not waste a moment. If you have risen to spy on others, judging by what you just said, you too, my dear son, would be better off. And it really is about, you know, a good part of this poetry. Sadi is well known for it. Unfortunately, our modern contemporary critics, because he has talked about religion a lot, and because he's giving advice a lot, they're like, oh, this moralist, religious Sadi. No, he's like, you know, he's just so sharp with picking up this point, and because he speaks from within the religion, that his voice is heard, is taught in schools from the time of his life to this day. No government ever has taken it off the agenda. Now, I think that, and I want to just insert a little bit of my own voice, a bit cheeky after Sadi, but I think, but I've really written this poem after facing a lot of need in my students to be heroes. You know, we do a lot of watch heroes stories, we want to be those big figures, and it's always a pain to tell them how to tell them that doing small things is harder than doing big things, and very often more effective than doing those big things. So one of the things I am trying and hoping to give my students is to teach them to look with intent, and that's what this poem is called. It is about lighting a fire the size of a flower pot, big enough to warm a single room, a few cold fingers and toes now and then, and a frozen heart once in a blue moon, if luck gives us a helping hand. It is about being here in the true sense of the word, with the kind of unwavering attention that does not leave a blade of grass unnoticed. It is about taking the time to deliver a piece of cake to a not so poor middle-class family whose collective memory has been invaded by tuition, rent, insurance, and antibiotics. And realizing that even pastry shops around the corner can be forgotten. It is not about disclosing the world's poverty, though it would be good if someone did, or battling hunger, disease, and ignorance in those whose mass misery is a mirror in its horrendous clarity, reflecting the greed of a gluttonous few. Some things are hard to acknowledge. Tears are for those who are beyond hope to live, but anything short of stunned silence is disrespectful of those who have no place in which to die. Some things are simply enormous. For ants, mountains do not define the horizon. It is not about heroes. Single acts of heroism and bravery raise too much dust. Think of the resulting poor visibility and all the cleaning to be done afterwards. It is about letting life flow through you. It is about letting life flow through you with the kind of glow, the kind of fresh, vibrant smile that can only fit on a most ordinary face. The kind of shy and pretentious reaching out that comes from living in a mass bigger than your own body. It is about looking with intent. So, I think one way of looking with intent is engage a scholarship. A scholarship that's about life. What's the connection between poetry and life? What's the connection between mathematics and life? What's the connection between having a skill and life? And how many of you saw the study that showed the 7 top executives in the Google came from humanities educational background? Right. And it's not a known fact. We don't really go after showing what this means, this education means to your life, and the fact that education should also be in the service of our well-being.
Yeah.
We academics feel we're taking away from the quality of education if we put it also in the service of ourselves and our students' well-being. And I think more and more as we go through a way of life in which we think we are in the age of communication, but less communication actually takes place than we hope to do, and as a result of that, we again contribute to a kind of loneliness that we are dealing with. Now, in the interest of time and the fact that I'm hoping we would be able to have a little bit of an exchange, let me segue into a little bit of the modern times, the own times, before I end in the next kind of 10 minutes. I know that's not very fair to them, but it wasn't fair to Rumi or Sadi either, so it would be unfair all around. Okay, and I want to start it with this. Rumi has a story called the story of Dastan Angur, the story of grapes. Does anybody know that? You need to listen to my podcast. It's called Radio Rumi. If you pass it around, it's a free podcast. It's on iTunes, Spotify, and if you could just...
and it's free.
And it's free. It's free, and if you just also Google Radio Rumi, you'll get it. So there's stories of Rumi come in that as well. Okay, so in that story, 4 people, I think an Arab, a Persian, a Turk, and a Greek are together walking, and this person gives them 1 dirham, just a little money, a dog. And they don't know each other's language very well, and they want to buy something, and they decide what to do. The Turk says, I want to get some uzum, and the Greek says, oh no, I want some estafil. Persian says, no, let's buy some angur. And the Arab says, no, we should get ourselves some anab. And they get into a fight, and they get, tear each other's clothes, and get really mad at each other. And then Rumi says, Ger bodi anja azizi sad zaban. If there was a Persian there, a dear heart with 100 languages. I wish we had one of those, okay. Well, maybe not 100, but a few. And that he would bring peace to them, because they all wanted the same thing. They only used different words for it. Yes, they had different words for it. So I want to use that the same way into our lives today, what we think is communication. Do we really communicate better now? And I'm afraid my answer is, in part because of this massive information machines that come our way, we do a lot less reading, we do a lot less community work together. As a result, we get what the information machines send our way and want us to buy and get, and so that really seriously handicaps our power to know. Another hurdle is what we touched on. We often equate knowing with facts. If I just know these figures and compare them, this is the result. No, we match more than statistics. A story that really moved me was a guy who had written a book about translation with tons of work. Said, I decided to do this because the first time I understood the weight of the Second World War was when I read a 1-paragraph letter from a Japanese prisoner to his mother. I had seen all the statistics, this many millions here, this many millions there. Nothing had moved me like that 1 paragraph where he spoke to his mother. And I think we have to bring that paragraph, hopefully about peace rather than war, back to life. Also, George Orwell has an essay that's worth going back and reading. It's called Politics in the English Language. And he writes it in 1946, but it's almost like he's writing it now. He says, well, I'm afraid language has been cloudy because we cannot talk about the major realities of our lives, which was at that time the Russian purges of populations, the British colonizing of India, the Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And so he says, what we do, we just resort to these pre-made phrases, which he says are like pre-structured hen houses, which must have been common in Britain at the time. And he says, we talk about democracy and improvement of life and mass migration. What is happening is a tragedy that we cannot talk about. We therefore clouding our language. And I think that poetry is a way to uncloud our language, if you like. And so, by way of that, I want to ask you, I mean, I just quoted it earlier today, how many of you would have guessed, and please don't take anything I say as a support for any totalitarian regime, but knowing, how many of you would have predicted that 67% of the university students in Iran are women? In all fields, all fields. There were bans at the beginning, but they had to remove the ban because they couldn't stand it. It doesn't come from the top, it's the complexity of the society. And it continues to be a complex society. What do you think is the rate of literacy in present-day Iran between the age of 15 and 25?
Give it 70%.
100%.
Wow.
City people, top cities are close to 90. If you put cities and villages today are about 80.
At all ages.
At all ages, yeah. If you put together 15 to 20 anywhere, the rate of literacy is 100% or illiteracy is 0. Okay, Iranian cinema, you're going to hear about it. I'm not going to say anything anymore. Publication rate, Iran is the highest publisher in the region. The number of publications and the range of the topics in which it publishes. Yes, there are some propaganda published by the government, but there's tons of other stuff published by others. Even when the war was going on, actually it's in my memoir, which you have in your hand, and in response to Reading the Play Tehran is the book that you have. I was in Tehran right during the Iran-Iraq war, and I went to a bookstore in front of Tehran University. Do you know what I saw? The translation of The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco.
Good.
And of course I paged through it because I wanted to know if anything had been censored, because I just read it like a week before. I don't know that even, there were, I had read an English translation, obviously I didn't read Italian, but, but it wasn't it. Why? Because, there's war, there's shortage of paper, there are all kinds of issues. Because there are enough interested readers. Because translators could make a fortune with translation. They can build a house if you have to become established translator. Bloggers. Where is Iran per capita in terms of blogger in the world? Number
1.
Right. And I was told this by a professor of communication in my University of Maryland. I can email you back his information. And it is, people who blog, who live in a village, you don't even know where on the map this village is. And so it comes from a deep desire that maybe was planted by Saadi in his travels to know other people, to connect with other people. And I will, just again, in the interest of time, I have only, because I started a little bit late, so do I have another 5 seconds?
Yeah, we have 15 minutes built in somewhere.
Okay, so I want to, okay, so then I tell you this too. A very good friend of mine who's a professor at Chapel Hill University called, so actually written a book called In the Footsteps of Muhammad.
University of North Carolina.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Chapel Hill.
Yeah.
Yes. So he and his wife, Judy, who's an artist, went to Iran. They came back. This was 2009 or 2010. They came back, and Judy told me this story. She said they were going into Tehran airport. They were going through inspection, and women were going through another area which was covered, and women were inspecting them, not men. And this woman saw our passport and said, "Are you from America?" He said, "Yes." And this woman started looking at the table, in the drawer, and Judy was getting worried what was going on. And she said, "Oh yeah, I have this presentation tomorrow. Could you correct this?" So, I'm not saying that every revolutionary, what is the word for it? Frozen-minded individual will act that way. But the number of people like her who want to know and who feeling that they belong to the world and they want to be a part of the world is so huge that the worst thing you can do is to attack that country and turn it into an enemy. And the best thing you can do to the hardliners is to support the country by being actually a supporter. Okay, I'm going to come here to an end by telling you that one of the greatest poets of our time in Iran, and you can actually hear it in her voice, I'm just going to read one short piece of a poem for you, is a woman called Farzad, and her poems exists in English translation. I have a chapter in the book that you have about her poetry. And so here's what she says. خطوط را رها خواهم کرد، شمارش اعداد را رها خواهم کرد، بر شکل‌های هندسی محدود به پهنه‌های حسی وسعت پناه خواهم برد. I will abandon all lines and the habit of counting with numbers. I will leave the geometric confines of shapes to roam the sensual expanses of vastness. Man Oryanam, 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 مثل سکوت های میان کلام های محبت اوریانم و زخم های من هم از عشق است. عشق، عشق. من این جزیره سرگردان را از اقیانوس و از انفجار کوه گذر دادم. I am naked, naked, naked. Like silences in between passionate words, I am naked. And all my wounds have been inflicted by love. Love, love. This wandering island I have rescued from the storm in the ocean and carried through volcanic eruptions. راز آن وجود متحدی بود که از هر ذره‌اش آفتاب به دنیا آمد. For falling apart was the secret of that unified existence of those most meager pieces. A sun was born. Thank you. And I'm going to end, really I'm going to end with a poem by a figure, a person who died in the year 2000. I have to tell you this, that in the early years of the revolution, actually, the books of Farzad were censored. Even the conversations about her were very hard to have in the major media. And then one revolutionary, who's no longer a revolutionary, but at the time was a major filmmaker actually, wrote an essay about her and said, for God's sake, why can't we talk about her? And that opened the floodgates. And ever since then, books come out. Sometimes they try to get rid of some of the poems. It doesn't work. It's so well known with the Iranian audiences. And also, When people, and the next person, the person I'm going to end with is Ahmad Shamlu, who died in the year 2000, and actually millions of people came out for his funeral, as they did about 2.5 million for Simir Bebani, who passed away, another major woman poet who passed away, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. And my son was in Iran. He called me and said, "Mom, you don't believe me, the whole streets are full." You know, it was just like, it was such a shock to her to see that an entire nation, half the population of like the major centers of the city come out just to say goodbye to this woman poet. But back to Shamlu. I mean, Shamlu had a very political existence. He was in Shah's prison. He came out, was a member of a party that was later on banned. He he was disliked by the Islamic Revolution. He left Iran, he went back to Iran. It was a very turbulent relationship. And we owe him a lot for really putting the human voice and the human rights on the agenda all the time. But he also had a tremendously lyrical voice. He was able to deal with all that political stuff with a lyrical voice, without losing that element. And this is one of those poems. It's called Anke Miguyad Dustat Daram, the one who says, I love you. آنکه میگوید دوستت دارم خونیاگر غمگینی است که آوازش را از دست داده است ای کاش عشق را زبان سخن بود. The one who says I love you is a sad musician who has lost his songs. If only love had its own words to speak. هزار کاکلی شاد در چشمان توست، هزار قناری خاموش در گلوی من. عشق را ای کاش زبان سخن بود. 1,000 songbirds hide in your every glance. 1,000 silent canaries are in my voice. If only love had its own word to speak. آنکه میگوید دوستت دارم دل اندوهگین شبی است که مهتابش را میجوید ای کاش عشق را زبان سخن بود. The one who says I love you is the sad heart of a night in search of his moonlight. If only love had its own words to speak. هزار آفتاب خندان در خرام توست، هزار ستاره گریان در تمنای من. عشق را ای کاش زبان سخن. Sorry. 1,000 smiling suns are in your every stride, and 1,000 desperate desires for you